Hello, it's me, Mike, with HPDS. This video will be a study and a reading of Exodus chapter 8. That's Exodus chapter 8. So I will go ahead and start this video off by reading the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Okay, so this video, I'd go ahead and ask that you please like the video and subscribe to the channel for future chapter by chapter Bible study. Chapter 8. Let's go ahead and let me give you a review. Chapter 7, we saw that God was stretching out his hand finally, and he was forcing Pharaoh. He was going to force Pharaoh to let his people go because Pharaoh was not doing it himself. And so God has started with the first plague, and in chapter 8, we're going to be going over a few more plagues. Let me go ahead and get this going. Exodus 8, the Lord multiplies his signs. So what we're going to be looking for in this chapter is in verses 1 through 15. We're going to see the second plague, which is going to be frogs. Then in verses 16 through 19, we're going to see the third plague of lice. And then from verses 20 through 24, we're going to see the fourth plague of flies. And then in the verses 25 through 32, at the end of the chapter, we're going to see that Pharaoh's heart is hardened yet again. So we're going to see Pharaoh's heart continuing to harden. And we're going to see the second, third, and the fourth plagues. So once again, in chapter 7, we saw the start of the plagues. Here in chapter 8, we're going to see the second, third, and the fourth plague. And we're going to see how those start to play out and so forth. So I will go ahead and get into reading chapter 8 as it is from the King James Version. And then I'll come back and I'll read it line by line and we'll see what the Holy Spirit brings. So King James Bible, Exodus 8 reads, And the Lord spake unto Moses, Go unto Pharaoh, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Let my people go, that they may serve me. And if thou refuse to let them go, behold, I will smite all thy borders with frogs. And the rivers shall bring forth frogs abundantly, which shall go up and come into thine house, and into thy bedchamber, and upon thy bed, and into the house of thy servants, and upon thy people, and into thine ovens, into thy kneading troughs. And the frogs shall come up both on thee and upon thy people, and upon all thy servants. And the Lord spake unto Moses, Say unto Aaron, Stretch forth thine hand with thy rod over the streams, over the rivers, and over the ponds, and cause frogs to come up upon the land of Egypt. And Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt. And the magicians did so with their enchantments, and brought up frogs upon the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron, and said, Entreat the Lord, that he may take away the frogs from me, and from my people, and I will let the people go, that they may do sacrifice unto the Lord. And Moses said unto Pharaoh, Glory over me, when shall I entreat for thee, and for thy servants, and for thy people, to destroy the frogs from thee, and thy houses, that they may remain in the river only? And he said, Tomorrow, he said. And he said, Be it according to thy word, that thou mayest know that there is none like unto the Lord our God. And the frogs shall depart from thee, and from thy houses, and from thy servants, and from thy people, they shall remain in the river only. And Moses and Aaron went out from Pharaoh, and Moses cried unto the Lord because of the frogs which he had brought against Pharaoh. And the Lord did according to the word of Moses, and the frogs died out of the houses, out of the villages, and out of the fields. And they gathered them together upon heaps, and the land stank. But when Pharaoh saw that there was respite, he hardened his heart, and hearkened not unto them as the Lord had said. And the Lord said unto Moses, Say unto Aaron, Stretch out thy rod, and smite the dust of the land, that it may become lice throughout the land of Egypt. And they did so. For Aaron stretched out his hand with his rod, and smote the dust of the earth, and it became lice in man and in beast. All the dust of the land became lice throughout all the land of Egypt. And the magicians did so with their enchantments to bring forth lice, but they could not. So there were lice upon man and upon beast. Then the magicians said unto Pharaoh, This is the finger of God. And Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he hearkened not unto them as the Lord had said. And the Lord said unto Moses, Rise up early in the morning, and stand before Pharaoh. Lo, he cometh forth to the water, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Let my people go, that they may serve me. Else, if thou wilt not let my people go, behold, I will send swarms of flies upon thee, and upon thy servants, and upon thy people, and into thy houses, and in the houses of the Egyptians shall be full of swarms of flies, and also the ground wherein they are. And I will sever in that day the land of Goshen, in which my people dwell, that no swarms of flies shall be there, to the end thou may knowest that I am the Lord in the midst of the earth. And I will put a division between my people and thy people. Tomorrow shall this sign be. And the Lord did so, and there came a grievous swarm of flies into the house of Pharaoh, and into his servants' houses, and into all the land of Egypt. The land was corrupted by reason of the swarm of flies. And Pharaoh called for Moses and for Aaron, and said, Go ye, sacrifice to your God in the land. And Moses said, It is not meet so to do, for we shall sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians to the Lord our God. Lo, shall we sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians before their eyes, and will they not stone us? We will go 3 days' journey into the wilderness, and sacrifice to the Lord our God as he shall command us. And Pharaoh said, I will let you go, that ye may sacrifice to the Lord your God in the wilderness. Only ye shall not go very far, entreat for me. And Moses said, Behold, I go out from thee, and I will entreat the Lord that the swarms of flies may depart from Pharaoh, from his servants, and from his people tomorrow. But let not Pharaoh deal deceitfully any more in letting the people go to sacrifice to the Lord. And Moses went out from Pharaoh and entreated the Lord. And the Lord did according to the word of Moses, and he removed the swarms of flies from Pharaoh, from his servants, and from his people there remained not one. And Pharaoh hardened his heart at this time also, neither would he let the people go. So that is Exodus 8 in its entirety. I feel like maybe I read a part of it twice, but I don't really know. But it was very repetitive going through these plagues here. There was a lot of the same thing going on, or he was making the same proclamations over and over and over again. Uh, but I will go ahead and read through that again. But that was Exodus 8 in its entirety right there. Exodus 8. So what did we read through again? We read, once again, we read through the second, the third, and the fourth plagues. And we read at the end that this still isn't enough. Pharaoh's heart is still getting hardened. He's still not letting the people go. At a certain point, he's just lying, and that he's going to let them go, and he keeps trying to, and he's making decisions, and it isn't happening. But so yes, verses 1 through 15, the second plague of frogs, verses 16 through 19, the third plague of lice, 20 through 24, verses 20 through 24, the fourth plague of flies, verses 25 to 32, Pharaoh's heart hardened. And this is ultimately, this is the Lord multiplying his signs as he said he would in previous chapters. Um, Going back as far as chapter 3, chapter 4, he said he was going to do this, and now he is doing it. It is happening. This is a go. Um, but some things I'll point out before I get into it is, first off, really, I want to well, you know what? Let me just get into it. Let me get into it, and I'll read it line by line, and we'll see something very interesting going on here. So, and the Lord spake unto Moses, Go unto Pharaoh, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Let my people go, that they may serve me. And if thou refuse to let them go, behold, I will smite all thy borders with frogs. So what we've got here is we've got God continuing on. Remember at the end of chapter 7, down at, at the end of chapter 7, we read that he commanded Moses and Aaron did, and they smote the waters. Remember, and we saw that the river was turned into blood. So that was the very first plague. So now the second plague, God is telling them, if you don't let my children go, if you don't let my people go, I'm gonna go ahead and smite your borders with frogs. I'm gonna put frogs all over the place. And he's very explicit. He says, the river shall bring forth frogs abundantly, and they're gonna go up into your house. They're gonna go into your rooms, your bedrooms. They're gonna get on your beds. They're gonna go into your servant's house. So not just the rich people. He's talking to the rich people first, the royal family, and then it's going to go into the houses of the servants, and then on the people who aren't even part of the royalty, and then it's going to go everywhere. It's going to go in the ovens and their frogs are going to be everywhere, is what God is saying. And it's something kind of unbelievable, something that doesn't just happen. It's something that's supernatural. It's God again showing his power over the world and over everything that it is. God can do whatever he wants, whatever he pleases. He has power that humans are not capable of doing. And the frog shall come up both on thee and upon thy people and upon all thy servants. And so the Lord's doing it. We go into verse 5. The Lord spake unto Moses, Stretch forth thine hand with thy rod over the streams, over the rivers, and cause frogs to come up upon the land. So there he goes. He's doing it. And the frogs come up, cover the land of Egypt. And the magicians did so with their enchantments, and they brought up frogs upon the land. So what we've got going on here, first off, before this is verse 7, let me get into this. What we've got going on is another symbol. Why is God throwing frogs? Okay, so we saw blood, waters turning into blood, and what was the symbol of that? And I don't know if I necessarily made mention of it in the last video on Exodus 7, but water is turning into blood, and I make mention that remember Jesus' first miracle was water into wine. Well, here God's first plague is water into blood, and his second plague is frogs all over the place. So what does this mean? What is God trying to tell us here? And it's something that you get into suddenly. You have to wonder, what is it with these Egyptians? Remember, I made mention that these Egyptians are known for their paganism, so they had a god for all sorts of things. And it's not something like I mentioned in the last video, but there was in fact a god of the river, and that Nile River there. So God here is attacking these false gods. Remember, God is at war with this king. This king has taken the people of Israel hostage and will not let them go, and has put them to forced labor. And God is now coming for them, and God is taking ownership. So he is at war. This is a legal war. This is just like what has happened all over the world. Wars occur, and this is a historical war between God, supernatural, the creator of all things. He was at war with these people, the Egyptians, and this is how he conducted his war. And he was telling them something here. He turned the water from water to blood, and then he put up frogs on their borders all over the place. And so what I did, and everybody's always free to do their own little thing, whatever they want to go ahead and do. But I started, Googling it up, started doing some research on how frogs are treated. And so I came across this, and of course it's Wikipedia, and I'll give out the little shouts. Everybody knows not to do college papers and don't ever source Wikipedia for some reason. But I'm going to go ahead and show it because it gets a good start on where we can go. Um, and we find out that frogs, it says, look at right here, in ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, frogs symbolized fertility, while in classical antiquity, the Greeks and the Romans associated frogs with fertility, harmony, and licentiousness. So you see, and of course, it goes into, other things about frogs and culture. Kermit the Frog, there's a story, Aesop. But we also get into the ancient Egypt, and that's what we're really looking for at this point. The Egyptians, the frog was a symbol of life and fertility, since millions of them were born after the annual flooding of the Nile, which brought fertility to the otherwise barren lands. Consequently, in Egyptian mythology, there began to be a frog goddess who represented fertility, named Heket. So we see, just like I was saying, a person named Heket. Heket was usually depicted as a frog or a woman with a frog's head, or more rarely as a frog on the end of a phallus, to explicitly indicate her association with fertility. A lesser known Egyptian god, Kek, was also sometimes shown in the form of a frog. Let's see, it says that there was primeval gods having the heads of frogs and sometimes depicted and so forth. But yes, remember, so we see this a phallus. So we obviously, I'm not going to define what a phallus is, but what I am going to define here is licentiousness. If we Google licentiousness, we see that this word is, the definition of licentious is being lacking in willpower or moral discipline, or being promiscuous, or unwilling to conform to accepted rules, prone to random sex, for example. A woman or man who has indiscriminate sex without regard of the consequence is an example of someone who might be described as licentious. So, a phallus symbol. All right, so we got a phallus, and we got people that can't control their sexual habits. People that are, sexually immoral, and the frog. So you see that the frog is seen as something that's a promiscuous, it's an evil creature, it's an evil spirit. And we do see later on in the book of Revelation, I don't quite know it off the top of my head, but in the book of Revelation, there is a note, there's a, he sees one of the things that happens is there's a whole bunch of frogs that come out, and they're evil spirits. It calls them an evil spirit of frogs, in these frogs. So this is, and that's in Revelation, so I won't jump that far ahead, seeing as this is only Exodus. But what we are seeing to these Egyptians and to us is that these frogs represent immoral sexuality, and not and immoral in the sense that it's uncontrollable. It's promiscuous to the point of uncontrollable. It's very demonic. It's evil. It's God is showing it to be animals. And remember, if you go back to some of my videos back in Genesis, what I mentioned about how God was treating humanity, and He was treating us, or at least He was treating the children of Israel like animals. God had taken them and He had made them like cattle, and they were His cattle. In fact, they were His firstborn, but He was treating them like cattle. And remember, He did that in the form of, requiring Abraham to circumcise. That was a circumcision. I mean, that's just like nowadays, we know that animals are usually tagged, their ears are pierced, all kinds of things. Their noses are pierced. They got little numbers, tags all over. It's something not only for cattle that we eat, and livestock that we consume, but also Park rangers will do it to keep track of animals on the lands, on parks, or they're kept track of animals that are hunted, animals in the wild, all kinds of animals are kept track in this manner. And God was doing the exact same thing, only He was doing it in the form of circumcision. And so now what we're seeing is we're gonna start seeing kind of a storyline being played out in these symbols, what God is explaining to what's going on, because he's got a legal document, he's got a legal right to attack Egypt, and that's exactly what he's doing. He's attacking Egypt, and he's doing it right here with a horde of frogs. He did it with the miracle of water turning into blood, and now he's doing it with this invasion of these sexually promiscuous. They're frogs. Let's be honest, they're frogs. Frogs are not known to be the smartest of creatures. Frogs don't captivate us like cats or dogs do. They're not as intelligent as your ape or your even your bears or your most of your mammals. Even birds are very intelligent compared, but the frogs, they have no real association with us. They're very mindless. They're amphibians. They don't. If you've ever had, kept a frog as a pet, you notice they don't really form an attachment. They don't care about you. They're not really concerned with who you are as a person. They're not very intelligent ultimately. At the end of the day, and they're not, obviously they're not very smart because they're very promiscuous. This lack of intelligence is what I will say personally, and I'll say it, coming from the spirit, the Holy Spirit, that this promiscuous behavior is comes from, lots of times it comes from a lack of intelligence. Frogs aren't very smart. People that are like this aren't very smart. We know for a fact that people that are sexually promiscuous oftentimes have problems in their history, in their past. You always got to look into their histories. Find out. There's a bad problem in this world where people get molested and so forth, and a lot of people have problems where they've been molested or raped. They've had multiple partners, they've had failed marriages, they've had failed relationships, multiple failed marriages, multiple failed sexual relationships. Some people actually promote this kind of behavior as well. We already have, we have pornography that's a huge problem in this world. We have, even recently this last year, in 2018, Backpage was taken down because of their promotion of prostitution. There was prostitution going on, and there was escorts. There's escorts being promoted. It's a profitable industry. Women are doing it every day, all over the country, here in the United States and all over the world, I'm sure. But this is kind of representative of this. That's what these are. They're frogs. They're these frogs, these sexually promiscuous creatures. And so what I did is I began to look this up after I found this out a little bit. You always want to get more into knowing what's going on here in the Bible, and so this is outside information. And we did come across this goddess called Heket. So the Egyptians came up with this goddess Heket, and so doing what I do, and obviously everyone's welcome to go do their own research, but these are just little things that I found upon quick Google searches. It's not very much information that I didn't go digging very deep, but I found some pretty easy things. And here is a website called EgyptianGods.org, and it got a little article about this god Heket, and it says, I'm going to read this: the Egyptian goddess of life, creation, childbirth, and fertility. She often depicted as woman with the head of a frog or a frog. So once again, here goes that frog that we were reading about. We did read about this in Wikipedia. This is because frogs symbolize life and fertility. So obviously, life. So frogs are depicted for having a lot of sex and have a lot of baby frogs. That's the whole deal. That's why frogs are looked at like that. That's the symbol. Let's see. She was always in her human, or she was sometimes in a frog form. So you see how this is this is a false god. This is not a real god. This is a depiction. This is a symbol that was a story more than likely created by these Egyptians to explain the world around them. And for some reason, this is something that they did, and God does not like this person. God does not like this depiction because God is, we're going to come to find out that God is he's going to say he's a jealous God. So I'm going to go ahead and throw that out there. He's a jealous God. He does not like paganism. He wants everybody to know that he is the one God. That's what this whole 10 plagues is about. Egypt will know that he is the Lord. Heket over here is not the Lord. That's what he's trying to tell them. So he is attacking Heket right here in um, this second plague. He is outright attacking a prototype or a story. There was a story of a known goddess. They were probably making statues to this person. They were probably telling stories about this person, and they were calling her a ket. And the pharaoh was probably praying and making sacrifices to this person. But it was just fake. It was all just fake stories. It wasn't from God, and God did not like it. And you'll see here that she is a child of the sun god Ra. And after Ra became Autumn Ra, she was the wife of Shu, the air and wind god. She is regarded as the eye of Ra and the mother of gods. So you see, I'm not gonna read the rest of this, but look at her. To honor her, to ask for permission, and to ensure the help during labor, pregnant women when often wear amulets and scarabs bearing her insignia. So we see that's another thing, the pregnancy. So all this is related to the fertility. And so we remember, and I learned this, you kind of remember that the first plague was about water turning into blood. And so I did some more research and I came across this document. And I'm not sure where I came across this document. It's called stat.rice.edu. So I guess this is something from Rice University or something. I don't really know. Um, but it does talk about this, and it is something, and it confirms what I was coming across. That God was using this as these plagues to actually attack so-called Egyptian gods. God was destroying the royal, what the Egyptians at the time would have known as gods. They had several gods, and the real God was attacking them all. And we find out that here she is right here, Heket. It does mention a cat coming in the frogs plague, but we also notice that I go back, and I did not mention this in Exodus 7, but I will mention it now, and I will use this document as we go through the rest of these plagues. But there was a queen, an Egyptian god called Happy, and the first plague that was given to the Egyptians from God was that of turning the water to blood. So yeah, we see that Moses, Aaron, the rod, it immediately turned to blood. All the fish partially able to duplicate. So they were able to duplicate this. Remember, 7 days. So that's all this is telling me. But it doesn't really tell me Happy was the Egyptian god of the Nile. This Egyptian god was a water bearer. So what we're seeing is, this king, this God had no power over the real God. The real God was able to turn the water into blood. This God, Happy, had nothing to do with it. Happy. And what we also see that the water turning to blood is a sign of what's coming next, which is the frogs. And it's like when a woman is giving birth. So we see something being birthed in these plagues, and we're going to see what it is that is being birthed, because it's going to be something very horrible that's being birthed. It's death is being birthed. We're seeing, and it's going to be a strange concept, but there's water's turning to blood, so we've got something being birthed into existence. And then we got these frogs, which is the fertility. So these Egyptians, if they were paying attention, and they if they really they would have known that these frogs mean that there's something going on. Something is being birthed. The water turned to blood. The water broke, turned to blood, just like a woman. That this happens a lots of times. This is symbolic of a woman. And then we have the frogs, which are symbolic of all the children that are being born, or all the things that are being born, and we're gonna see that in this, what it is. Um, it's kind of symbolic of humans in general. But I'm gonna go ahead and continue forth with reading the Bible, because that's I kind of wanted to get into that to explain what's going to be going on here and why God is doing that, because the story is now molding that something is being born, something very terrible is being born. All these frogs, and it's coming. It's all these frogs. Here's all these frogs, the symbol of fertility. Here comes, obviously there's fertility going on. The water is symbolic of a birth. And then then Pharaoh called for Moses. But of course, all these frogs did come up. Aaron stretched over. Let's see, we saw this in verse 7. Aaron stretched out his hand, and here come up the frogs. So the frogs started coming up, and they are everywhere. And so we do see that the magicians did so with their enchantments. And what did they do? They were able to bring up some frogs too. So the magic trick that I did make mention of, these magicians are doing little magic tricks. And they were somehow able to make the frogs come up too. So they're still convincing the Pharaoh that, hey, this is some sort of just magic trick that these guys are doing. It's not God. This is some sort of magic trick. It's just tricks. We can do it too. Uh, Nonetheless, the Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron, and he says, "Take the frogs away from me." And he's, entreat the Lord. So now he's acknowledging the Lord for sure. He's like, hey, go tell your Lord, take away these frogs, and I will let the people go, and that they may do. So he's really, this is getting to be pretty bad. For some reason though, he's still just, he's got, a problem here. He says, he's not really seeing this as a threat, like a war, like a real war, because as far as he's probably concerned, a war is, men lining up and running at each other with swords and bows and arrows and so forth, and killing each other. But this is God conducting warfare. And as far as this guy's concerned, he thinks it's just a little message. So he's got to understand the message. The message coming in, something is being born here, and it's going to be annoying. Obviously, it's not going to be the greatest thing. It's going to be kind of annoying. It's going to be all these frogs all over your land of Egypt, and so he tells him to take him away, and Moses does do it. So he goes, all right, when will I do it? So he's giving him all kinds of proof. So Moses is giving Pharaoh all kinds of proof, and he tells him, when do you want me to do it? And of course he says, do it tomorrow. As soon as tomorrow, that thou mayest know, so of course he does it, and the frogs will depart. All right, so they're gonna leave, and they're gonna only be in the river. So that's what this is kind of getting into. And let's see what happens here. So it happens, and the Lord did according to the word, and the frogs died out of the houses, out of the village, and all the fields, and they gathered them upon heaps, and the land stink. And this is what I'm really wanting to point out. So now we know that what we're seeing is that something is being birthed. God is, and this is in the form of a war, some sort of a war. Spirit is being born. And it's real fertile. It's a real fertile spirit. And what's sad about it is they all die. And when they die, all these people, the humans have to gather them all up, and the land stink. So it's like a waste of all these creatures. And this is kind of what he's showing with the human race. These are animals, but God is treating the humans like animals, and it is the Pharaoh that is not taking the message here. He himself is taking himself to be greater than all things, even greater than these little frogs over here. He's not seeing the message, but this is the message, that all this stuff is being real fertile, and it's coming from a lack of, let's be honest, relationship, morality. We remember even as far back as Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, they were having multiple wives and so forth. So who knows how many multiple wives these children of Israel were keeping even at this time. Many of them probably had multiple wives. Some of these children of Israel, they're going to be saved out of here. But But clearly, that's what God is showing, that they're kind of going at it like animals. They're not really, being the greatest moral fibers, or in the town over here. And let's see. Uh-oh, pressed the wrong button. Um, and so they're all dying. But of course, this still isn't, like I said, he's still not taking the message. It hearkened not unto him, as the Lord had said, and his heart was still hardened. And so that's pretty much the end of the second plague. All right, so he tells him, here's another sentence in this story, and that sentence is, first sentence is over here, something being born, water turning into blood, and it's not a very great sign here. It's going to be some very big and powerful, very spiritual, not something human, but it's very symbolic. So symbolic birth. And then here comes, as the next sentence was, the fertility coming on. There's a fertility, so there's a lot of things being born, not just one thing. A lot of things being born here, and it's sad because their ultimate destiny is to be dead, gathered in heaps and stinking all over the land. That's what whatever's being born, all this fertility is being wasted and gathered into heaps and just being a complete nuisance. It's not even a good thing. It's just a nuisance. And then, but here comes the Pharaoh. It's still not enough. So the Lord said unto Moses, stretch out thy rod and smite the dust of the land, that it may become lice throughout the land of Egypt. All right, so here's the big contention. Here's another contention. The King James Version reads lice. Now, I'm going to go ahead, and when we get into it, we'll see that other people translate it as gnats. And even the Strong's Hebrew kind of calls it a gnat. It's a swarm. And you'll see that right here in Exodus 8:16, that most versions actually read, the earth may become gnats, all the land. But only the King James is really that it may become lice throughout the land. And I'm going to go ahead and put in, what the Spirit is telling me now to put in, to this kind of, what people kind of always have this argument. I've come across this argument before, but this is pointing out to why the King James Version is special. There's something special about the King James Version, because when you look at other versions of this, you'll see that, other versions call it other things. Let me see, morphology, let's see. Like I said, over here they call it gnats. Most of the other people are doing it gnats. Let's see, for example, the version, and let's go to the Strong's NASB, and let's see, this one is verse 16, gnats. So the NASB reads it as gnats. So let me go ahead and read another one. How about the New Living Translation? I know I've read out New Living Translation before too. Plague of gnats. See, they call it a plague of gnats. It's always a plague of gnats. Let's take a look at, maybe I can find the NIV. Or how about, let's see, what's another popular version? Like I said, the NIV is a popular version, New International Version. Let's see, 16, plague of gnats. Here it goes, talking about gnats. And all right, so like I said, but the King James Version reads lice. So they're kind of the only people, even the original word is kind of based off of the words gnats, but King James went ahead and they did it and said lice. And it kind of, here's the reason why I agree with the word lice, and that's why I believe that the King James Version, here's just one of the many other spots that I'm sure that there are other in the King James that read a little bit different, and the King James one is the one that should be believed, and the King James should be the authority. It is the one that reads lice, and lice it is. It was not gnats, it was lice. And the reason being because gnats are flies. So when you do some research, gnats are like swarms. They actually fly around. And they are considered flies. They're not quite fruit flies, but they are flies. And lice are not flies. Lice are, they're creatures that in humans, they exist in your hair, or on your body, or what we know, they're also an STD. What's known again an STD comes in your pubic region. We call them crabs. They're lice, but they're called, in modern terms, you know them as a sexually transmitted disease called crabs. And that's what fits with this story here. We got a story of something being birthed. We got a story of fertility that's kind of very stupid fertility, though, because of stupidity, because of these, very unsmart frogs. It's not like they're very intelligent. They're not doing very smart sexual activities. And look, here comes STDs. And on the when the lice are on your pubic region, they're STDs. But when they're on your head, that's usually something that comes on children. The children are the children usually have head lice. It's still a problem in today's world. You get lice in your head when you're a kid. It's not everybody, but every now and then, lots of kids do get it, and it's kind of a symbol of what's going on here. The children are being neglected. With the lice is a sign of child neglect, and in the pubic region, it's a sign of sexually transmitted diseases. So we got, again, more sexual promiscuity that the Lord is attacking here. He is showing, he's really going to war with the people of Egypt, with the Pharaoh in particular, over their bad behaviors. And their bad behaviors are starting off with this their sexual immorality. And he's really putting it to the Egyptians, basically calling them out to be animals. They're like animals the way they're going, and they're animals nature, and to be like animals, and not to be. They're not acting like proper humans, proper righteous human beings. They're not acting like a proper civilization in the mind of God, in the eyes of God. They're acting like animals when they should be acting like proper righteous kings. That's kind of the whole point here. And we're seeing that here with the lice, and it has to do with the lice. And the lice, like I said, it's a sexually transmitted disease amongst the promiscuous Egyptians, as well as a sign of the neglect going on upon the children as well. And then as well, in general, lice don't fly, they jump around. And you also get lice, I guess, these kind of lice, these body lice, will also basically just invade the whole home area. They're pretty much just a nuisance in the whole area in your home, in the domestic area, amongst families. And so that's why I believe it's definitely lice, not gnats. And I do believe that the word gnats is a huge misinterpretation, and it's done either out of ignorance, or sometimes it is actually done out of malice. And I do believe some of these versions do it in maliciously. I believe the NIV is actually kind of malicious. When I look at the NIV and I've read through it, I think the NIV and the people over at Zondervan are pretty malicious. I don't think they have proper teachers, and I think they're after kind of money. And I think they kind of pervert a lot of the words to mean other things. And I believe gnats is kind of diminishing what's going on here, because uh, it's not telling that story, and that's a very specific story that's coming out after these frogs, the sexual promiscuity, and then it's leading into the effects of the sexual promiscuity, and those effects are obviously uh insidious, this sexually transmitted diseases, as well as child neglect. The child's hair, the children, it's usually known to be children with their itchy scalps and so forth. um, but more than that, we see that it came from the dust of the land. And then we also see later on, we read in 19, we're going to see that God did it, and it comes from the dust of the land, right? So when he does it, here he goes, he's stretching out his hand. Aaron stretches out his hand. And it became lice in man and in beast, and all the dust of the land became lice throughout the land of Egypt. So you see they're coming up out of the dust. But here the magicians try to do it, but they couldn't. So there was lice upon man. And so here come the magicians. They were able to bring up the frogs. But for some reason, something's going on with these lice. Something about these lice. And they can't reproduce it. And they go up to Pharaoh and they say, look, this is the finger of God. So here is what we would know as his scientists. In this world, you would be, oh, the scientists are failing us. The scientists don't know why this is happening. That's what these magicians are doing. They knew why the frogs were happening. They were able to explain and replicate the frog situation. But when it came to this lice coming out of the dust of the earth, they were not able to replicate it. And I'll tell you why. My opinion coming out of the Holy Spirit as I'm in it. Um, what's going on here is this is just like the rainbow situation. Way back in Genesis, what was it? Genesis 8, Genesis 9, something like that. Genesis 8, I want to say. God makes the rainbow, and that rainbow was a sign that came out of nowhere that had never been there before. So something had to change. And that's what I make mention if you go and you read those, if you watch my videos and my explanation and what I teach when I go to the, to the Bible is that something happened in the world, in physics, in the, the laws of physics, or the atmosphere in the universe, in the earth. And it's probably the atmosphere in the earth, quite honestly. The atmosphere in the earth changed after the flood, so that suddenly rainbows were possible. Before that, they weren't possible. And all of a sudden, they're possible. And this is kind of a thing. This is another where I think this is another great miracle. Once again, these are miracles. This is God showing his miracles to these. This is something that is impossible. And this dust just turned into lice. And what it also looks like is that these lice probably may not have existed before this time. This was something that these people had never seen these creatures. They had never known of these creatures, and suddenly we have creatures, lice, that represent sexual diseases, that represent child neglect, and also represent animal neglect. The neglect of the, like I said, it's all domestic. It's all a very domestic issue here. The whole family, even their animals, were attacked by these creatures that had probably never been seen before. They literally came out of the dust of the earth as though they had never been there before. And that's why the magicians, that's why they can't bring forth their lights. They're like, we don't even know what these creatures are. So this is incredible. It's just like, in today's world, what if, all of a sudden, just like, for example, the people used to say that the giant squid didn't exist. And then they suddenly found giant squids in the ocean, and they have video proof. And, they've come across a few giant squids now in the past, 20, 30, 40 years now. And suddenly the giant squid is a thing. It's back into culture. Everybody knows giant squids are real. Well, this is kind of what's going on, is these animals never probably existed, and now all of a sudden they're existing. And now and after and henceforth, it's a sign to the Egyptians that these creatures were never here. Now they're here. Um, and that's why the magicians themselves are saying this is the finger of God. We have never seen these creatures. He predicted it. We thought he was talking about something. He, brought these completely new animals upon us, is what it looks like. And these animals, like I said, represent sexual immorality, which leads to child neglect, which leads to domestic neglect, which leads to animal neglect, and so forth. We're not right, we're just, acting like animals, acting like frogs. But going on into it, keep going on. So he goes and Pharaoh still isn't really caring. He's probably getting angry. He's getting more and more hardened. He doesn't like what's going on. But the Lord tells Moses to rise up in the early morning and stand before Pharaoh. Lo, he come into the water and saying to him, let my people go that they may serve me. And he tells them, so this time, it's nothing. You notice that there's nothing Pharaoh can do about this. For example, whereas with the frog situation, the Pharaoh went to Moses and said, hey, get these frogs out of here. And Moses says, all right, when do you want me to do it? And he just says, "Do it tomorrow." All right, I'll get rid of them tomorrow. So he gets rid of them that next day. That's not an option here. Pharaoh doesn't get rid of these lice. These lice, like I said, they're here to stay. And so that's why that looks like I said, that could very well be that lice did not appear. They were not around. And then all of a sudden, here comes lice popping forth magically out of dirt, out of the dust of the earth. They did not exist before, and now they're here to stay. And that's why Pharaoh does not get rid of them. He doesn't ask Moses to get rid of them. They do not leave. Instead, what happens is we go straight into the fourth plague of flies. And so he goes back out there. Moses goes back out there, tells them, "Let my people go, that they may serve me. Else, if thou wilt not let my people go, behold, I will send swarms of flies upon thee, and upon thy servants, and upon thy people." And so just like the frogs were everywhere, now you're gonna have flies. And so that's what I'm saying. Gnats are flies. You gotta, when you go look up what gnats are, and we go, what are gnats? We're gonna look up what gnats are. Orchid, a gnat is any main species of tiny flying insects. They're flying. They're fly. Most often they fly, and they are flies. Let's see, blah blah blah. Look at non-biting flies. Non-biting flies. That's what they are. The Smithsonian Institute describes them as non-biting flies. So that's why I don't understand why a lot. I do kind of have an understanding of why those other versions read gnats, because a gnat is a fly. So a gnat is, that was the word that the people had, and that's why I think that was the only word that these people had were flies. Flies already were existing, and so gnats were part of this family of flies, and gnats were already existing, and flies were already existing, but lice did not exist. And lice probably resembled some sort of land fly. They resembled that because they jumped around, perhaps, but the people did not have a word for it, it looks like. And I think that's why lice is the better, they were properly identified by the King James Version people, that they recognized that it was lice that popped into existence. And that's why the word is strange like that, because they probably had words, but they didn't have a word for what exactly that creature was, which was, like I said, what we know to be lice. And that's why the Hebrew word was kind of like this gnat situation. Nonetheless, they're here to stay. And the next one is another. Now we've got some flying creatures. And so here come the flies. But God says that he's going to sever in that land, the land of Goshen. But before I continue on to that, I want to get into this document that I found earlier. What is it that this Egyptian plague? There's the dust, Egyptian, there's a god named Geb. So Geb, let's search Geb. Let's see. Let's read a few things about Geb. Obviously, there's an ancient god named Geb, and I'm gonna go look at Britannica.com, because I guess Britannica would probably be, that's the encyclopedia. Uh, the god of the earth, the physical support of the world. Geb constituted, along with Nut, his sister, the second generation in the Ennead of Heliopolis. In Egyptian art, his portrayal of the earth was often depicted lying by the feet of Shu, the air god, with Nut, the goddess of the sky, arched above them. Geb was usually portrayed as a man without any distinguishing characters, but he was represented with his head surmounted by a goose. He was the third divine ruler. So here's another god, and he's the god of what they would have known as dirt. So he was the god of, and so like I said, so that's what's going on. Here's God making another creature. So let me find this. Here you go. So here comes the story. Here comes the next line in the book. We've got blood turning into water. Water turning into blood. Something's being born, because of all the fertility that's going on, the mindless fertility, which leads to death, and then something from that, symbol of the STDs, as well as the child neglect and domestic home neglect, and now we're moving into this new um, you know, a new symbol. And what's this new symbol? Let's go into this Egyptian god. That was the Geb. There's the lice. Now we're moving into the flies. Let's see, the swarm of flies. Khepri had the head of a fly. So let's see what we can find out. Search Google for Khepri. Here's another one. Let's see who I can find. Kind of scroll down here. Let's go back to this Britannica. Once again, we'll stick with the encyclopedia. We won't go to Wikipedia. Well, I don't see anything here about this person. Learn that this does not currently have an article, so they lied to me. They don't have an article here. Let's go to this guy, Ancient Egypt. A man at the head of a scarab beetle, was a god of creation, the movement of the sun and rebirth. The scarab beetle lays its eggs in a ball of dung. Then it rolls the ball along the ground, so it's a little beetle here. But you know, the ancient Egyptians believed that the beetles just appeared from nowhere, as they believed that their creator God had appeared from nowhere. Look at that. That's just coming into the exact same concept of what happened with the lice. The lice just came out of nowhere, just came out of the dirt. Um, and so now we've got another god here who's the fly situation. And that's interesting because the flies, which are gnats, which is how most of these Bibles translate that third plague, they call it just a fly. So it's kind of interesting. But now here you got these scarab. It's just interesting the symbols that's going on. But the symbology is here that God here, and because this God that this false god right here, the god of creation over here, is being attacked. God is attacking the real God, the real Lord is attacking these false gods, and he's attacking them by doing something that they should have the power to do, but he instead is having the power to do it, and he's doing it of his own thing. So these people thought those beetles came from nowhere, and they attributed to this god right here, Khepri. Well, now God is completely made this new creature called the lice. He's made these lice creatures that don't fly but are being called flies. And that's a brand new creature that came out of nowhere. And God is showing them the difference between these animals, like with these two different plagues, the third followed by the fourth. He's showing, look, this is one animal. Now here, just so you can be sure that it's a completely different animal, he sends all these different flies. So obviously they know these are two completely different animals because they're being afflicted in two different ways by two different creatures, two different sets of creatures. One set being lice, one set being flies. The lice came out of nowhere, there's just like this god. Apparently, these people thought that the beetles came out of nowhere and attributed to this god of the flies. Um, the god with the fly head. That's what's going on here. You see how it's all intermingling here? That's what God is telling him. God is telling them, your gods did not create no beetle out of nowhere. I created creatures out of nowhere. Here, for example, is yet another one. So the Egyptians would have been attributing the beetle, as we just saw, to this guy over here, Khepri, which Khepri is the one is the focus of this fourth plague. And Khepri is the guy that supposedly made the beetle. And so now God is saying, now you should know who really made the beetle. It wasn't this guy Khepri, it was me, God. I made the beetle, just like I've made this new lice. And now here are these flies, which is, what your God over here, with the head of a scarab over here, is this let's see. He's Khepri, the Egyptian god, had the head of a fly, who sometimes had a head of a fly. Sometimes he also had, you see what I'm saying? They don't really keep track of it. He also had the head of a scarab, apparently. So they're trying to attribute these new creatures to this, false god. And God is, clearly showing them that, he is the creator. He's the one that, birthed this new creation, and this new creation is this lice. And and there he is. That's what he's showing. That's exactly what he's showing him. That's exactly what he's doing here. And not that I'm not entirely sure people see it. It's kind of there. I see it. I mean, the Holy Spirit is here to show it to us, and that's what he's telling them. He's telling them, look, He's attacking all of these gods, and he's attacking it with physical proofs of what he can do. And he made brand new creatures, and he is that God that makes brand new creatures, not this God. And in fact, here's all these flies to prove it. The fly, if that's the God, that's what you should know, that this fly is the creator of that. The symbol of the fly, the creator or whatever. And he tells them, but look, I'm going to sever in that day my people, so that the flies, and he's separating his people though from the other people. So um and that's his sign. Tomorrow shall be the sign. So it happens. And there came a grievous swarm of flies into the house of Pharaoh, and into his servants' houses, and into all the land of Egypt. The land was corrupted by the reason of the swarm of flies. And Pharaoh called for Moses and for Aaron, and said, go ye, sacrifice to your God in the land. So this seems that, these swarm of flies was, it's only here the fourth plague, these flies. But, this one is pretty intense again. Everything is corrupted. Everything is, everybody's annoyed. There's flies everywhere. Nothing can get done. Nothing can be eaten properly. Flies are everywhere. And so it's enough that here comes Pharaoh again. He didn't really complain or do anything about the lice, but he is going to go do something. Like, all right, he says, finally, he gives in, go sacrifice to your God in the land. But he doesn't want them to leave. He just says, sacrifice in the land. But Moses, knowing this is kind of like a trick, he says, no, we can't do it. It's not good, not meet so to do. So it's not good for us to do that. It's not proper. It's not meet. It's not a good condition. For we shall sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians to the Lord our God. And I think what they mean by abomination is they're going to sacrifice sheep. And if we remember you got to go back to Joseph. Joseph, when they weren't allowed to eat with the Hebrews, the Egyptians didn't eat with the Hebrews because they were shepherds, and they found that to be an abomination to sheep or something. So I think he's talking about, we're going to sacrifice something that the Egyptians considered an abomination. Y'all guys culturally don't like it, and that's what we're going to go do. We're going to go do that. And if we do that in the Egyptians before their eyes, will they not stone us? So he's kind of seeing it like, look, we need to get out of this town to do what we're going to go do, because your people and your gods and all your little false gods and all your culture hates what we're going to do. Y'all guys think it's bad. So y'all are going to kill us. Y'all would stone us if y'all saw us doing it in the land. We wanted to go 3 days out of the land. So that's what's going on here. It's not a good deal. Moses recognizes it, tells them, nope, can't do it. You're just using this as an excuse. You're trying to trick us and get us killed. We're going to look bad, politically bad. And he continues and tells them, we will go 3 days' journey into the wilderness, as he shall command us. And Pharaoh said, I will let you go, that ye may sacrifice to the Lord your God, only ye shall not go very far. So he's kind of giving in here, saying, all right, you can go into the wilderness. Fine, I'll let you go. Just don't go too far. And then he tells them, but behold, and so he does, and he's letting him go. He's saying, fine, go ahead. It was bad enough that he was going to say, go ahead. And so for rewarding this kind of behavior, we see that Moses said, behold, I go out from thee, and I will entreat the Lord that the swarm of flies may depart from Pharaoh, from his servants, and from his people tomorrow, but let not Pharaoh deal deceitfully anymore in not letting the people go. So he says, I'm going to go ahead, and you're letting us go. Great. And because you're letting us go, I'm going to go ahead and ask God to get the flies out of your face. I'm going to let them, get rid of the swarms of flies. Just don't lie to us. Let us go do what I'm asking. It's not a big deal. 3 days shouldn't be a problem. They're kind of coming to an agreement here. And Moses went out from Pharaoh, and he entreated the Lord. So he gets rid of the flies. Remember, he doesn't get rid of the lice. He does get rid of the frogs. And the water was only blood for about a week. For 1 week, it was blood. So that's, keep that in mind. The blood lasted for a week. The second one was the frogs, which eventually the frogs are taken away. Remember, they were put up into heaps and they stink. And then the third plague was the lice, and the lice never went away. Remember, he never asked for the lice to go away. They didn't go away. Now we're getting the fourth plague, the flies. Moses is the one. The Pharaoh didn't ask for him to take him out. Moses did it himself. Says, you know what? Since you're letting us go, I'm going to ask God to get rid of the flies. So he did, and the Lord did that. He removed the swarms of flies from Pharaoh, from his feet, and there remained not one. But we see at the end of the story, we see that. And Pharaoh hardened his heart at this time also. Neither would he let the people go. So even though he said, you know what, I'm going to let you go. Fine, I'm going to let you go. Go. And Moses said, great. I'm going to ask God to get rid of the flies, but, don't be deceitful anymore. Don't be lying to us. You said you're going to let us go. You're letting us go. And he got rid of the flies, but of course the Pharaoh changes his mind and says, you know what? He still doesn't let the people go. Even though he said he would, the people still are not being let go. So that is Exodus 8. It's very it's getting really deep because we're seeing some serious warfare going on. It may seem maybe if you don't recognize the symbology, you are seeing some very intense warfare going on, and God is in fact attacking these false gods and proving that they are false gods. They are not in control of anything. There is no God of the river. The one God is the one God of the river. He is God over that river. That's his river. It's not this river belonging to this happy person. There's no happy. The Nile doesn't belong to happy. It belongs to the Lord God, who is speaking through Moses, and he turned the water to blood. All right? Not this guy. He did. And then the same thing with this goddess of fertility. They want to say that fertility comes from this goddess named Hecate. And God is saying, the one true God that is speaking through Moses right now is saying, no, fertility comes through me. Here's all the frogs to prove it. So here comes the frogs. And then he's attacking the neck, and with the next one, the lice, he is actually attacking over here a couple of gods here. He's attacking this god Geb, and he's also attacking Capri through these next two, because this god Geb is supposed to be the over the dust of the earth. Let's search. I don't remember if I searched for this guy. Was a god of the earth. Oh yeah, he was his grand. That's all it was. He was just talking about Shu. He was just what was he? Let's see. He was Keb, Autumn, Tefnut, blah blah blah. He was just supposed to be the god of the earth. God of the earth, and out of the earth, the creator. We see that this guy should have been able to create creatures, right? But out of the dust. But no, it's the one true God speaking through Moses. He's the God that made the lights come out of the dirt, the dust, the earth. And then this God, Capri, who is known for creation, he's also being attacked and they're being attacked by the proof. That's why we've got the mistranslation of gnats and lice. And it comes from the fact that the gnats was probably the only word they had to explain something that they didn't have a word for, because that word came out of nowhere. And this guy, who is known for bringing scarabs or whatever, the beetle, they were giving, when new creatures come out of nowhere, it's this God. Well, no, God is telling them, no, when new creatures come out of nowhere, it's me. And I do it out of the dirt, and so forth. So God is, you can see he's coming out and he's throwing his punches at what these people knew as a God. And they were talking about all these different gods, and the one true God is speaking through Moses, and he is proving to them physical signs that these people had never seen, and wonders that they had never seen before. And all the people in Egypt are seeing this. This is something that is, like I said, it's not a fairy tale. This is an historical record. This is what happened. The water turned into blood. It wasn't something natural that anybody could say, oh, red tide, this, bacteria, that, whatever. No, that's not what it was. It was actual blood. For a week, the water was blood. Just as real as when Jesus turned water into wine, that water had been turned into blood. And all the animals died and so forth. And people couldn't drink it. And it smelled like blood more than likely while you were there because it was real blood. And it was just bad, and that was a real miracle. And then, like I said, that's what's going on here. Is he's that's just what's going on here. He's really doing miracles. He's really doing some warfare. He's really giving these people real signs of his existence, and he's doing it through Moses. Moses is going out there very dramatically with Aaron, and they're doing very dramatic signs, and he's saying very explicit words, and he is saying making very explicit prophecies to these people, and very important people are seeing this, and they are not giving it the attention that they need to be giving it. But nonetheless, all the people all over the country are seeing it, and they're recognizing that it's coming from these high places among the Pharaoh and Moses and the children of Israel and themselves and so forth. But I'll go ahead and end this video here. It's been quite a long video, actually. This has been one of my longer videos. There's a lot of information going on here, and you'll see that what is going on here is God is attacking various false gods using these using these plagues, and he's doing it by showing these people that the stories that they already have, that they're attributing to other people and to other gods, to these fake gods. He is saying those stories should be attributed to this same God that Moses is preaching and Moses is introducing and explaining to you. So Moses is telling you about the one true God, and it's this same God, and he's not different gods as you suppose, you Egyptians. He is one God, as Moses is telling you. And he was doing all these miracles for their benefit, so that they could see that he was the Lord and not these false gods that they were calling people, that they were making just statues to worship. They were, making false idols to it. And we do recognize, and we do learn later on, that God abhors this idolatry. He just absolutely hates it. These people are worshiping foolishness, and obviously they're believing in fake stories, and God is right there trying to help them and trying to take his people, and instead they want to worship false gods, and God hates that. So but like I said, I will go ahead and end this video here. I will say God bless you to anyone who is watching. Please like and subscribe to please like the video, subscribe to the channel. I do chapter by chapter Bible studies. God bless anyone who's watching. I pray that we all bless Jesus Christ, and may Jesus Christ bless all of us. Amen.